Strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions.Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Welcome, everyone, to Caregiver Solutions Info. I am your host, Marcia Teele, and I'm so happy that you could join us today. This show is specifically for caregivers who are caring for someone with memory loss, whether it is as a result of Alzheimer's disease, a vascular disease called a vascular type dementia. Lots of different things can cause dementia, cause memory loss. And it is a journey that if you're on it, I'm sure it wasn't something that you expected. As with all caregivers, they're thrust into caregiving. And so this show is for you, the family caregiver, to help you understand what is ahead of you and to hopefully help you with tips and information that will make your journey on the caregiving road a little bit smoother. So we are live here from Boca Raton, Florida. And if you are listening on the radio locally, I am so glad. You can also watch us live stream on caregiversolutions.info on that website. And you can actually watch our guest and see what's going on here in the studio in Boca Raton day to day. We get lots of information. We collect emails. We get phone calls from lots of people. So we are happy that you joined us. If you do have a question or you do have something that you would like for us to discuss, you're welcome to contact me. My email address is delray@arden-courts.com, and I'll be happy to read it and talk about it on the air the following week. We are live every Tuesday, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So one of the things that I'm very proud of is that Arden Courts is a national sponsor of this program. Arden Courts memory care communities across the United States. There's about 52 of them. They do memory care. Matter of fact, that's all they do is memory care for people that don't need a nursing home, but yet shouldn't or can't be at home any longer. Arden Courts is also concerned about you, the caregiver. They care for people, whether you're a resident in one of their beautiful communities or whether you're a family caregiver. Arden Courts would like to help you by offering a free book called The 36-Hour Day. This is a book that is chock full of information, tips, all kinds of detail about the differences between dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, and a lot of information that you can glean from this to understand what your loved one is going through, and then some actual tips and some advice. So if you don't have this book, I would highly recommend you calling Arden Courts, and they would be very happy to provide it to you free of charge. All you have to do is give them a call on their toll-free number, and that is 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410. Tell them that you heard about this offer on the program, and they'll be happy to get one out to you right away. So we'll repeat that number later in the program if you didn't have a pen and paper handy. So today we're going to be talking about a subject that is very important to understand when you're dealing with someone with Alzheimer's disease, because there are different stages. If you want to categorize it, there's different ways to do that. Very simplistically, it's mild, moderate, and severe. There's lots of different stages, lots of different doctors can categorize it in different ways. But in general, if you are talking about someone who is higher functioning, they're at a higher level of cognitive functioning, and then you have the moderate, and then you have the more severe as the dementia progresses. And so we're going to be talking about that and a little bit about how the changes happen in people as they progress through the different stages, and how their abilities to function in everyday life changes. So I wanted to let everyone know that there is a way that a well-known New York University Medical Center researcher named Barry Reisman, he's a doctor, and he and his colleagues actually developed the Functional Assessment Staging Scale. They call it FAST for short, FAST, again, Functional Assessment Staging Scale. And this scale allows professionals and caregivers to chart the decline of people with Alzheimer's disease. So it kind of helps you to look at the whole picture and what's ahead for that person. And on the FAST scale, they have 7 different stages. And they have characteristics that go with those 7 stages that kind of give you an idea. Now, it's not always black and white. Sometimes the characteristics are gray areas where someone may have a characteristic of one stage and another characteristic of another stage. But for the most part, in general, this way of determining the stages of the disease is pretty accurate, and it's very easy for caregivers and professionals to use this scale. And we're going to be talking about that along with an actual family whose mother was diagnosed with dementia, and her changes as she was going through and as she is currently going through the different stages of the disease. So we're going to be talking about that today. And I want to tell you that not every person that has Alzheimer's behaves in the same way. Not everyone has the same behaviors or idiosyncrasies, but in general, it's a memory loss, loss of executive functioning, loss of judgment, and as the disease progresses, again, the person with dementia is going to be less and less capable. As a matter of fact, this staging, this FAST staging score, actually lists different years, and it akins a person with Alzheimer's to children. As children are growing up or as children are advancing in their abilities, a person with Alzheimer's is actually declining in their abilities. So the Reisberg FAST scale shows that the decline typical in Alzheimer's disease is the reversal of normal skill acquisition by children. So it sounds a little bit confusing, but in general terms and in regular words, it's basically saying that as a person with Alzheimer's disease progresses in their disease, they become more childlike. And that's basically what this is saying. So we're going to be talking about this, and I am so happy today to introduce to you a daughter who's a caregiver and her husband. And so I'm here, and I'd like to welcome with me Debbie and Ron. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today.
Sure.
I'm happy that you're here. I know that this is not always an easy thing to talk about because, it's your family, it's very personal, but I applaud you because I know that you're here because you want to help other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, Debbie, it's your mom that is now currently going through the dementia. And Ron, you're the backup guy. I know that you're there right with Debbie helping her.
Yep.
Obviously, though, she's the primary caregiver. I know that you are living here in South Florida, and your mom was in the same development as you were, keeping an eye on her. And you have your sidekick, Ron, and it's very important to have family members to be able to, help you, support you, be a backup. It's real important. So thank you, Ron, also for being on the program with
You're
us.
very welcome.
So we're
Good
going
to be
to
here.
we're going to hear from you today too about the support that families that can
Sure.
give. So Debbie, let's start out with a little bit about your mom. Tell me about your mom. Who was she, and then how old is she first of all?
Currently, she's going to be 88 next month. In December.
Okay, so she's
87.
She's
almost 88.
almost 88 years old. And tell me about who she was, and then at what part of her life, maybe what age, and when you started noticing that she wasn't her normal self. Can you tell me that?
Absolutely. First of all, we have a history in our family where my mother watched my grandmother, her mother, decline with Alzheimer's disease. So it was something that I had seen in the family for many years and watched that process. And with my own mother, she was a very active, outgoing social being, involved in so many things, and played golf, exercised, played cards, and just did everything, and had a really wonderful full life. And about 3 years ago, at age 85, I began to see just a few little things that sort of just sparked an interest in me, and to kind of look at her a little more closely than I had been looking at her. And I noticed, for example, we would play cards at the same time, but she would get to the card room maybe a half hour or 45 minutes earlier than she needed to be there to save a table that she said she needed to save. And
That was unusual, though,
it
for
was,
her.
because I thought, she was maybe supposed to start at noon, but to get there at 11:15 or whatever the time was back then. And so gradually she was getting more confused about the time, and she'd tell me, I'm not sure, I have to call so-and-so and find out again. And she had been doing this for many years, excuse me, so I knew that she played this card game at the same time.
So she was kind of making up excuses of why she was so early,
Yes.
like she was saving a
Saving
table.
a table, but she didn't have to save it that far in advance, and just little things like that. And before long, the lady who she had played cards with started to sort of push her out of the group. And
Really?
So things started to decline, and I would say that was maybe a year after I noticed those first symptoms of the time element.
Now, how did that come about? Did your mom say that they didn't want her to play, or did they tell you? How did you find out?
This woman actually had called my mom, and I'm not really sure what transpired, but there was another lady at the card table that my mother wasn't crazy about, and I think this first lady sort of used her as an excuse to say to my mom, kind of, it's either you or her. And my mom, instead of taking the brunt of whatever was going to come her way, she just said, you know what, I'll back out. And that's it. I'm out of the group. And so that's basically what had transpired.
Mm-hmm.
So from that point on, I noticed that she was getting a little less social. However, she was still working out at the gym and still playing golf. And at some point, we started to hear more about medication and possibly see if this would be something that she would be interested in doing. And I had gone to the doctors with her. And my mom was pretty much in denial that she had a memory issue. But in speaking with the doctor, I was telling him about some of the things that transpired, and he suggested, along, with me pushing it, that it would be something to try and just see if it helped.
Get her on some of the memory medicine that was out there, like an Aricept or an Namenda.
Right,
Mhm,
exactly.
Okay.
And so she finally, I think it took about 6 months after we initially, proposed that, she finally started to take it. So I would say that she was about 86-ish by that point. Correct?
One other thing, though, is, I love my mother-in-law. She's like my own mother. But she fought almost every step. It was never easy having her accept what was going on. She was in constant denial. And whenever we suggested a new way of approaching her life, she really fought back on it. It was very tough on my wife, but we just kept at it until she finally saw the light, that she needed to do something a little bit different to help her cope.
Now, your mom was a very independent person.
Yes, she was.
And was she on her own? Your dad had died?
Right. My dad had died 9 years ago. So she was alone for about 6 years before the symptoms started to occur. And it was at that point that I let me back up a little bit. I called my son, who's a clinical psychologist. He lives in Minnesota. And I asked him to please see if he could find some facilities that I could start to scout out for the possibility of my mom needing some help. And again, this goes back to seeing how mishandled my grandmother was with this whole process. They really had no clue on what to do with her and how to proceed, so I didn't want that to happen with my mom.
So you were going to be proactive,
Exactly.
knowing that you had a family history,
Exactly.
seeing that it maybe wasn't the best way with your grandmother, and now that you're the daughter, you're going to be proactive and
Right.
try to get as much information as you could.
Right. And in seeing what transpired, I also knew that it wasn't good for somebody of that age, especially, and going through what she was going through, to move from place to place. I really did not want that to happen, which again I saw with my grandmother. I just felt it would feed into more disorientation, etc. So I knew that when the time would be right for my mother, that it was going to try to be a one-shot deal, one facility.
To age in place.
Exactly. So my son started asking questions because he didn't deal with the aging population. He knew people who did, where he worked, and they had mentioned a couple places in Delray because I didn't want to be that far from my mother, and Arden Court being one of them. So we went looking for places, and we met up with you at some point. And now
That was about 3 years ago?
It's about 2.5.
2.5 years ago?
2.5 years ago
that we first met.
Yes, and I just felt that this was perfect for her because of the hominess. It did not look institutionalized. It looked very calm. And one of the things my son had mentioned to me, which I didn't even realize, was that this place is really study-based on people with dementia, and they recognize that they need less stimulation, less of that hubbub that can happen in one of these big facilities, and less bells and whistles. And that was one of the things that I was honing in on, because when other places have these beautiful chandeliers and bright lights, and you have a huge bedroom with a TV, one of the things my son said to me is that the reason Arden Court is set up so differently is because it promotes her not being isolated and keeping in with other people. And that was starting to happen to her along the way, is that she was becoming more isolated. And I did not want that for her. Her being such a social person, I just knew that it was important for her to be with other people and not be in her room. And
Wow,
that's what could happen.
your mom is so lucky to have you and your son, her grandson, because you're very smart people. I mean, yes, he's trained, and you said he was a clinical psychologist, and you have a background too, don't you?
I do.
What's your background?
I'm a registered nurse, and then I became a school psychologist. And so, that being said, my son took it a step further and became a clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
But we all have, in fact, my husband was a psych major in college before he went on to different area, but we all have that basic knowledge.
Well, and it was good for your family because you recognized what didn't go well with your grandmother, and now after you've had your education and your clinical studies, you understood a little bit more about what a person needs just from a psychological point of view.
Exactly.
And obviously your son too. So this is very interesting. So we've set the stage now, and Debbie's going to be coming back. Ron's going to be joining in. And when we come back from our first commercial break, and we're going to be talking about when Debbie started noticing things about Mom, what happened, because the story gets really good. So you don't want to miss, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know, we understand, we can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that
Solutions.Info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back, and I have Debbie here with her husband, Ron. Debbie is a family caregiver. She is the daughter of a person who has Alzheimer's disease, and she is talking to us today about the journey that she and Ron were on with Mom and Mom's journey, so that we can glean from this example a lot of the information that perhaps would help you too. So Debbie, we're talking about Mom and about the certain things you were noticing, that she was acting out of character.
Exactly.
And things were happening in her life, and you became aware of those. And so you actually started scouting out places, and you mentioned that you had found Arden Courts and the reason that you liked it. So at that point, what did you do then?
Well, at that point, I secured a room for her for the future. I knew it was down the road. I knew she was so high functioning that she wasn't ready. And obviously, my husband telling you that how resistive she was, we had to take that into consideration. But she was still pretty independent. And I believe at some point, some ladies from Arden Court came out to assess her. We kind of had to set it up in a way that she wouldn't be suspicious, and we were able to do that. My grandchildren were in. And they also agreed she was very high functioning, but still able to maintain a level of independence. And my being right there on the premises with her, even though we didn't live together, I was really able to see how well she was taking care of herself. And she's still doing all the right things, bathing, and everything was going well, and shopping, and she still drove. However, that being said, months down the road, we noticed an incident, and somebody had called me to let me know that she was seen on the road going the opposite direction and kind of weaving in and out of traffic.
Uh-oh.
So that's when, and there were some other incidences too. She had parked in a parking lot and couldn't find her car. She had moved it.
Oh, well, that happens to the best of us.
I agree. I agree.
But if you eventually can't find it, right, then there's a problem. Or if you think someone stole your car, that's a problem.
And she didn't. And when this woman saw her on the road, she was going the opposite way of home, and asked this woman how to get back to where she lived. So.
And she was only just a mile to 2 miles away, where normally, when she was fully functioning, she would have known where she was. And she was so close to where she lived.
So that was a big red flag.
And she didn't recognize the woman who she does normally recognize. So this woman being out of context a little bit from where she lives, but she should have recognized her. However, my sister and I had to plan doing some paperwork with the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, because it's very difficult to revoke somebody's license. And that was like a 3 or 4 month process, and that took a long time. That being said, she someone at the club had seen my mom looking for her car in a parking lot that no longer existed after the car was taken.
So she forgot that you took her car away.
There were several episodes where she just kept looking for her car, and even though we told her what the story was, and having it suspended, her license suspended, that didn't help the subsequent episodes because every now and then she would go looking for her car.
And she wasn't buying it, you know.
It's not a question, but she didn't remember.
And she didn't remember
our conversation.
Mm-hmm. And she probably, when you first told her, was she very angry when you first told her?
Yeah,
very.
We ended up having a
angry.
family intervention. Actually, my nephew and my sister were down, and all of us were talking to her about this whole scenario. And this is prior to the license being revoked, and she just felt that, and what we were trying to do at the time was get her somebody to not live with her, but like a companion. And this is where we had that other intervention. The lady from Senior Home Companions had come out to meet my mom, and with that and the car incident, talking about how maybe it would be a good idea to have somebody driving her and she wouldn't have to rely on getting around. She fought that for a while too. But once a license was revoked, then she didn't have a choice but to accept the companion. So that was something that occurred. Let me just back up a little bit to another incident that I noticed that really shocked me. My mom being an avid card player, we were playing a game called Rummy Q, which we'd always done through the years. And it's similar to Gin Rummy, only with tiles, and you have to match up the colors and the numbers or whatever to play the game. I took a peek around because she was playing with Ron, and I took a peek around just to see her setup. Not one number or color was organized. It was all over the place, and that is so not like her at all.
It's a sequence type of game like Gin Rummy is. You have sets and you have runs. And so you put the sets together, you put the runs together, just like Gin, only with tiles. She didn't have one set or one run put together.
So she lost that ability, for sequencing, and which is one of the signs when people have dementia that they can't sequence anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a real big event for Debbie and me. I mean, we really took hold of that event.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing that occurred was we golfed on occasion together because we live in the same development. And I would always try and pick a tournament with her where we could play together because my flight was different than hers. And so it got to a point a few times where she thought that she didn't need to bring her own golf balls. She said, "Don't they supply them?" And I said, "No, Mom, we have to have our own golf balls." And again, that was something that I really...
Every golfer knows.
Every golfer knows.
She's been doing this forever.
Right, you don't share anything.
No.
And I always had to remind her of the day that she was going to play to be up and ready, because now she was starting to sleep in more or forget that it was Tuesday or whatever was happening.
Also, there was so much put on Debbie because her mother no longer really could relate to time anymore. So Debbie was calling her not just for golf, she was calling her for her hair appointment. She was calling her for when she's going out at night, with the girls. And she would call her a couple of minutes before she was going out. "Mom, are you ready?" There were a couple times she had to run over there and help her. Whenever there was a scheduled event, she was unable to take care of herself in order to show up to the event.
So she
Debbie
really
was
needs that
always
queuing.
there.
That queuing.
Yes. A lot of
Are you
queuing.
ready? Did you get dressed? Do you have your
Yes.
purse? The
Debbie
queuing.
Always.
And that's a burden. I mean, that's a stressful burden, because not only are you trying to schedule your own life, now you've got your mom scheduled, literally, hour to hour with what she's supposed to be doing.
And at that point also, I was starting to take over her finances because she was double, she would pay a check and then another check out and forget that she paid the first check for something. So it became more difficult for her. So I took over the finances, but then I was also starting to budget her cash because I could see she was going through it. And this was a woman who always paid cash, not charge. So I was trying to reteach her to use her charge card and not go through the cash so much, because then I'd have to always get to the bank with her, and it would take it on me to do that.
Another
thing to
errand to do.
But to reteach somebody that is very difficult, and I knew that was going to be a problem. So again, we used to fight about that, which I'm not proud of. It was a hassle. Again, moving forward to that, all of those things occurred, and then the car went away. So, those are the sequence of events before the car. And then once the car went away and the senior home companion came in, it really took the burden off of me a lot. She was driving my mom to places. However, on days that the companion didn't show up, a couple of incidences occurred where my mom left the apartment. It would be 95 degrees on. She'd be wearing jeans and a sweater, and she'd walk a mile to the store.
From her home?
From her home, and got into a car one time with strangers. And she said they were just girls, and it would be fine. It was fine. And I said, Mom, you wouldn't have let me do this. How could you do something like this? It's not fine. It's dangerous. So again, I was seeing her make some poor choices.
Very poor choices. And she didn't realize the danger of those choices.
Exactly. I was just astonished. So, and again, a couple of times, again, she did that, but we caught her just in the nick of time before we got her home. So that was the beginning of her need to have more than just the companion. And it was a choice I was going to have to make, whether or not we were going to place her in a facility or 24/7. And again, this was something that I was just going crazy over. And you were going to say something?
Why don't you talk about the repetitive phone calls?
Oh, right. Well, again, she had, this again is after the senior home companion lady came. So she was calling me a lot for the same thing, asking if my dad was there. Where's Dad?
Now, he had passed away.
Right.
And she didn't remember that.
Exactly.
And she's calling you to ask where her husband is.
Exactly.
And
She
what
still doesn't.
And what did you say?
Right. Well, at that point, and she's still living at home, and I had to keep giving her reality checks, and I would say, Mom, remember when we lived so-and-so, and you were there for Thanksgiving, and Dad passed? Oh, yeah. And how did he pass? And I'd have to explain to her what happened.
And was I there?
Oh,
She always asks.
forgot.
Always
Yeah, she
says,
forgot
"Was
that
I
she was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were telling her the truth at this
Absolutely.
point, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I remember now." Maybe
Exactly.
a little covering up, like she thought she remembered, but she was letting
Right.
you think that she remembered.
And just to fast forward now, it still happens on occasion, and now it's almost like it tears me up because it tears her up. That it's a realization that he's gone, and she would cry. So her memory is getting obviously.
She had
worse.
to relive that moment over and over again.
That's right.
That was the problem.
That's right.
So
yeah.
it's horrible to watch that.
Yeah, so sometimes, that's a very difficult thing for families to deal with if you have a spouse and, he passes or she passes. What do you say? Because they don't remember they passed. Every time you tell them, they grieve all over again. And it's very heart-wrenching to see that. And a lot of families have trouble, doing the therapeutic fib, which is, well, Dad went out of town on a business trip, to make her feel better. A lot of families can't do that. But it's really a hard decision, because do you tell them the truth and watch them grieve all over again, which is, from just the beginning, because they don't know, or do you lie a little bit and, let her think that he's coming back? And I think every family, struggles with that.
Sure.
But you have to find what works for you. And in your case, it really was better to tell her, because she was more accepting of it, I think, at that point.
Well, she would also, if we tried the other way, and she would try and call my sister, who doesn't live in town, asking for Dad, because she thought he was up north, and so it just wasn't working out to lie. But what I did do is, now that where she's placed, I put in a little picture of in memoriam with the dates and the passings of my dad and her parents, because she even thinks her parents sometimes are alive. So that's sort of a visual reminder for her. It doesn't always work, because she's not always in her room, which is a good thing, not to be in her room, because she's out socializing with the ladies, but at least it helps a little bit.
Yeah, that's a very good idea, because when she's in her room, she can see it, and she can reflect, and
Right.
it, comforts her to remember, oh yeah, and she
Exactly.
doesn't have to worry about it anymore. Wow, this is good. This is good stuff, but we're not done yet,
No,
because
we're not.
there's some family dynamics and a lot more to the story than meets the eye. So we're going to take next quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision.
Wish to share a story? Call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back, and we're talking about different stages of Alzheimer's disease and how it affects a person. And we're talking with a real-life family who is going through this disease, has gone through it with their mom. And I wanted to say thank you again, Ron and Debbie, for being here today. We talked about the FAST staging and the FAST staging test. It was developed by Dr. Barry Reisberg out of New York University Medical Center. And it has 7 stages, and it's a tool to help caregivers and professionals to chart the decline of people with Alzheimer's disease. So now we've talked about mom up to a certain point where she was at home and things started happening. You were noticing different things happening, took away her car. Now she needed a companion at home to drive her places so she wouldn't hitchhike with strangers and things like that. So I think I'm going to talk about the first few stages, and I'm sure that you can identify with this because the first stage is a normal adult, just a normal adult who has no functional decline. So we all start there, okay? As the disease progresses, it becomes a normal older adult. Now, this might be something where mild cognitive impairment sets in. MCI, mild cognitive impairment, is something that happens naturally as we get older. We start forgetting some things. We forget where we parked our car, for instance, but we remember eventually. We don't think someone stole our car. It might be something where we can't remember someone's names on the tip of our tongue, and eventually we do remember. Things like this. Our brain naturally slows down as we age. So the second stage in the FAST test is of a normal older adult, and the characteristic of that is personal awareness of some functional decline. So if you're out there and you're listening, you're watching us today, and you have forgotten where you put your keys and you wanted to go to the store, you might be in stage 2 of normal older adult, but you're eventually going to find your keys. And if you forget where you park your car, you're going to probably think of some nice tips and tricks to help you remember the next time where you parked it, because you're able to function that way to create something in your brain that's going to remind you, oh yeah, I'm at the store and I parked under the P from Publix, so when I come back I just have to look at the P and that's my row. You're going to figure that out. A person that has Alzheimer's is not going to figure that out. So now we get to the third stage, early Alzheimer's disease. With early Alzheimer's disease, a characteristic in this staging is noticeable deficits in demanding job situations. So if someone's actually still working, or they're functioning as in a volunteer capacity, or they're helping out with a club and they have duties, they're going to have noticeable deficits. Maybe they're not remembering to do a certain job that they had to do, or make a certain phone call, and they're very noticeable that people are noticing these things. Then number 4, mild Alzheimer's disease. I think, Debbie, this is where you mentioned you had to take over for Mom. Under mild Alzheimer's disease, which is stage 4, the characteristic is requires assistance in complicated tasks such as handling finances and planning parties. So you already mentioned you had to take over Mom's finances because she was double paying bills and wasn't able to handle money. Number 5, we're down to moderate Alzheimer's disease. The characteristic of that is requires assistance in choosing proper attire. Now, let's start there. Did Mom ever have any problems in choosing proper attire? I think you might have mentioned something just a minute ago. When she went outside and took a walk for a mile, she had on a sweater and it was 95 degrees out.
Exactly.
So you already gave us an example of that.
Yeah, she has. Also, we'd see her in the same outfit over again, where she didn't, change her clothes. Or I'd walk in on her on a Sunday afternoon and she was still in her pajamas. And that is so not like her.
It's out of character for her.
Very out of character for her. And forgetting to just do those simple things of brushing her teeth. She was always so hygienic, and I know she wasn't following suit.
She also wasn't eating enough.
Exactly, right. She was losing weight. She was forgetting to eat. And she would cover that up by saying she wasn't hungry. And, the thing is, she wasn't as active, so she probably wasn't as hungry, but she was losing weight, and it wasn't good. So,
right. And not that she couldn't maybe fix herself something, but she forgot to do it, or, the brain's not telling the body, that, okay, I need to go do this, I'm hungry.
Right.
She's not properly dressing. Stage 6 is moderately severe Alzheimer's disease, according to Dr. Barry Reisberg, who developed this staging test. And under that, it says requires assistance in dressing, bathing, and toileting, and may have urinary and fecal incontinence. Now, let's use that and talk about Mom. Is she experiencing this?
Well, I have to back up a little bit because her whole life she had what she called a weak bladder. So even when she was healthy and everything, she would laugh and have to go to the bathroom quickly and sometimes not make it there in time.
Right.
So that was something that was functional. She never wanted to address it with a doctor. We pleaded with her to do that. It might have been a little bit of a prolapse. I don't know, but she never addressed it. So that was that. Well, fast forward to now your 80s and having dementia, and now this situation is happening. Well, you're certainly not going to think about getting there in time. And so incontinence is starting to creep up now more and more. And even when she was living at home, I noticed there was a scent of odor of urine. So things were happening, and
obviously she wasn't bathing properly at that point in time because you could smell results of the incontinence, and so that was stage 6, moderately severe Alzheimer's disease. All right, and I don't think she's here yet, but we're going to finish the staging just so we can talk about it. Sure. The last one is stage 7, and it's severe Alzheimer's disease. The characteristic, according to this chart, is speech ability declines to about half a dozen intelligible words, progressive loss of abilities to walk, sit upright, smile, and hold the head up. I know your mom's not there. I saw her today. Yeah. She's very active still. Right, yeah. She's walking, talking, can say whatever she wants to say. But you see the difference, and as we go through these stages, you can see how she's actually progressed through the different stages. And according to Dr. Reisberg, stage 7 is severe. And we don't know how long it takes to get from stage 1 to stage 7. And that's the other uncertainty about this whole disease process, because some people go through the stages very quickly, other people take years and years to go through the stages.
Right.
That's the scary part too, because you never know when the shoe's going to drop and you're going to get to the next stage.
Right.
So obviously your mom is not in stage 7, thank goodness,
Yes.
but she right now is having better quality of life. So let's get back to then what happened with the aide at home, and she was having a companion to take her places and things, and she liked that companion.
She did. And to be honest with you, I knew that even though she liked her, she didn't always want her there. And it was a fight. And one of the things that I had my sister do, my poor sister, was make sure she called her on the days that the aide was coming, so she'd be up and kind of ready for her. And she would sometimes say, oh, okay, I'll be ready. But other times she would say, I don't want her here today, and cancel her. And we never gave Mom the phone number to cancel her because we knew that would be bad.
Right.
However, it became the transition between this companion and needing more really became a safety issue for me. I always said to my sister, it would have been easier on me to place her a long time ago. However, that being said, I don't want to make this easy for me. It's got to be right for Mom when she needs it, not when I need it.
Right.
And that was the biggest thing for me to do, because I fought it in my own head when it would be right for her. And everybody said, oh, she's going to slip. She's going to go faster. You're going to see. And one of the things, actually, my other son said is he's very research-based, too. He said, because he's a statistician, I'll plug that, too. He said one of the things research shows is that they don't decline faster when they go into a facility. And as a matter of fact, seeing my mom more social, I'm seeing her maintain longer and better than that slippery slope she was dealing with outside of being in the facility. So I'm very pleased to see what's happening. And yes, she's going to slip and slide. I get that. But I'm finding her maintaining better now than what she was doing before. So,
And how long ago did she actually become a resident of Arden Courts?
only 2 months, is it?
3 months.
Two months.
Okay, and it's amazing,
October, yeah, 2 months.
right? It's amazing to see
difference.
the big difference, because you're already noticing in 2 months' time that she's actually maintaining what she used to have before she came in, and it's actually better because she is becoming more social and she's made friends.
Absolutely. And the setup of that place has been phenomenal. I keep thanking the Lord that she's in there, because she's not in her room all the time. She is, socializing, and she's met a couple ladies who are actually higher functioning than she is, which shocked me, because I thought she was the big fish, and she's a little below, but that's okay. Where she was living, though, she was at the bottom. So it's like she's risen to the top again.
And she was isolated.
And she's not,
Totally.
she's not isolated. She's out there and taking walks again, which she, instead of walking to Publix, she's walking around
Actually,
the
she was
circle.
bragging to me today that when she walks, she makes these other women walk, but she walks so fast compared to them that they're following her like little ducks.
Well, that makes her feel important,
It does.
too.
Sure does.
So rather than her self-esteem being belittled because the
Right.
ladies at the clubhouse didn't want her to play cards anymore because
Right.
she didn't know how, and shunned her from the
Right.
card game,
Exactly.
now she's got reached a level of importance so that people look up to her.
Right.
Yes.
And that elevates her self-esteem, which is going to just improve her quality of life overall.
Right.
If you had told me that I would be painting a picture with her, I would have said, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. She would never paint a picture or anything like that, get involved in these things.
So tell me about that. What happened?
I painted a picture with her. You had a lady come in and show us how to paint, and I have no skills, and my mother is worse than I am with creativity. We painted a beautiful picture, and we have it in her room,
And she's very
she's so
proud
of
of
it. And she's just doing activities that I never expected her to do, and I think that's because of where she is. She would never have painted in her own home. Even the companion who wanted to get her involved in some things with painting and arts and crafts, she bucked that system right away. And I'm just seeing her in hearing that she's in sing-alongs and playing bingo or whatever she's doing, cognitive. activities that you have them in. I sat with her in one of them, and I'm whispering to her some of the answers, and she would tell them what I said, but it was cute.
But you know what? I'm glad you brought that up because, when someone is at home and they don't have all those opportunities, they don't have an opportunity. Who's going to come into the home and teach somebody how to paint?
Right.
Who's going to come in the home and play bingo with you?
Or word games.
And a board game, and maybe an aide will do that, but it doesn't give you the chance to be social with your peers.
Exactly.
And that's what's important. That's what she was lacking. You had help in the home, which is a great thing to do. It's a good place to start, but it's not the end all. I kind of call it a Band-Aid. Everyone starts with help in the home, but then it gets to a point, like you said, that you knew she needed more.
Right. Right.
And then giving her all these opportunities. Well, it's wonderful because she's doing things you never thought she would do, but did she ever have an opportunity to even try them?
No.
And now she does because she's in a place that's safe for her.
Exactly.
She feels comfortable. Given her the freedom to do it. No one is judging, and that's a biggie too, because they are judged by their peers because they're not capable of doing what they used to do. No one's judging, and she's having a good time.
Yes. I'm sleeping, everybody. I'm sleeping, knowing that she's safe. And to me, that was the biggest thing. At night, I would worry: could she be taking a walk? And as for the 24/7 thing, I knew that number one, she could close the door on them and not let them in, or that the scheduling would be a nightmare for me because you have to have two. And it was just, I just knew. And also, again, she would be a shut-in. She would not be with people. So what good was that? And she needed to be with people. It's just, she's a social being. We're all social beings. And she was very outgoing. So
every time we come in to visit her, every time, we have to take her away from her friends.
I know.
She's
I feel terrible.
always with her new girlfriends, and it's wonderful to see.
Yeah, today I actually saw her sitting out on the patio. It was a beautiful day here, and she was sitting on the patio, and she had her face up to the sun and had her eyes closed, and she was enjoying that sunshine. And
That's
next to
great.
her was her friend, and I walked out. I said, "Hi, girls, what's going on?" And they were sunning themselves, and your mom said, I need a bathing suit. She was she was all getting hot and loving the sun, and she was so happy to be able to go outside on her own and still be safe and and have the freedom to do that and enjoy.
Wonderful.
Whereas if she went outside at home, you don't know what would happen.
Exactly.
And then she's going to be monitored, make sure she doesn't stay out too long, make sure she hydrates and doesn't get dehydrated, which is very, very important.
Absolutely.
Now, you have family, you have a sister out of the area.
Yes, I do.
And I know she's very much involved in Mom's life, too, but she lived up north, and you were the one down here. So how difficult was it being here with Mom and trying to relay everything to an out-of-town sibling who wants to be involved and is involved? And how do you deal with that? Just for people that might want to know, do you have any tips or things of how do you communicate and explain things as they're going on? Because it's hard if you're not there to see it all.
And I also recognize the fact that she did a lot with my grandmother when my grandmother was going through this. My sister was pretty much the caregiver for her because my mom was in Florida, and so she dealt with that a lot, and she's a social worker, so she had a lot of insights into facilities. And at that time, my mom and her sister, my aunt, did not agree on the best placement for my grandmother, so there was a lot of fighting, and it was a mess. And a lot of that fell to my sister because her hands were tied. If one said no and one said yes, she was caught in the middle.
Right.
So we didn't want that to happen for us with my mom. And pretty much when we found Arden Court, I said to my sister, come down and look at it, which she did. And she liked it, but living up north, she sort of wanted my mom to be near her. And she also felt that it wasn't the bells and whistles that I was talking about with,
the chandelier, the marble floors, the
big
concierge.
And the big TV and the
big bedroom.
And her, Mom lived in a palace. Not really, but, it's palatial compared to where she's going to go. I just can't see that. She's going to be in a 9x5 cell. This is terrible. I said, Cheryl, but look at this. You realize something that the research shows, and I explained it to her what the research shows and
Why the room is small and why
Right.
it's set up the way it is.
Exactly,
And
the walking circle, the way, the whole bit. And it just, she understood it, and she said, I'm not going to fight you. This is something she needs to do. But then my nephew came down, which was her son, and he did not care for it. He wanted the palace for Grandma, too.
Right. And it's funny because that's very common in families, because when we're looking for a place for someone else, we don't see it through their eyes. We don't see it through the eyes of the person that has dementia.
Right.
We're looking at it as like, well, what we would like.
Right.
I would love to live in the palace. I would
Right.
love
A
to
resort.
live the
Yeah.
resort and all the fancy things. And it's hard unless you understand dementia and Alzheimer's disease and what it does to a person and how it affects them. It's hard to picture somebody not being in that type of environment that maybe they came out of a country club environment,
Right.
because the rooms are smaller. But that was on purpose, and everything that is there has a reason why it's there for that person with dementia. So unless you really know and understand, which is hard to do,
It is.
because you've never really had to understand it, and you're looking at it, this is my parent, and it's hard to be objective about it because you're so close to the situation. So you can't blame families that say, oh, that's not good for her. But in reality, when you look at the reasons behind it, it's actually the best thing for them.
Oh, well, and I said to her, look when you don't have the expertise in something, you go to the experts to find out what the research shows and what's the best place for somebody. If you need a cardiologist, for a heart problem, you go to them. Whatever it is, you go to the experts that can tell you what the best thing is. So that's why I turned to my son, and he turned to the people that knew. And so this is what, we felt was the best thing to do.
Not only that, we have friends who did put their mother in this palatial place. She never comes out of her room.
Regrets it.
And she hates the place.
Right.
And we hear this from the kids who are our friends. And we just thank our lucky stars that we know you guys.
Well, I'm glad that you found Arden Courts, too. And your
Absolutely.
mother is lovely, and we love her to death. And you all
you.
are a lovely family. And I want to thank you for being with us today,
Thank you.
sharing your story. I'm so glad Mom is doing so well.
too.
She's
Doing great.
She is
Doing
great. She's
great.
the best.
Happy.
And I am just thrilled that it all worked out and all your
too.
fears were relieved.
Yes.
And it's really great to see you happy and smiling, and that Mom is doing so well. So if you're there and you didn't get the 800 number, the 888-478-2410, call to get your free 36-hour day book. It is free just for the asking, as a gift to you from Arden Courts Memory Care Community. I want to invite you to tune in next week, same time, same place, for Caregiver Solutions.Info. We'll have another wonderful show for you. And don't forget, in the meantime, give somebody a hug, because they need it, and so do you. So we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on Caregiversolutions.Info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week.